Good evening, everyone. I established Divine Destiny Ministry a few years ago to address basic needs of the people in my community, particularly in the Five Points area. I'm pleased to guide you through what I hope will be an informative evening for you. Black and brown people have always fought against injustice in hopes of improving the well-being of their families and their communities. Today, we are becoming more aware of the historical but unknown role ordinary people had in resisting injustice because of publication and media that has changed the narrative to include their stories. For instance, Wilmington's Lie, a recent book by David Zucchino, tells a different story of the so-called Wilmington riot that we are accustomed to hearing. Tonight, we will hear from two speakers with testimonies about our fight for justice. Our first speaker will be Lisa Henderson, attorney, historian, and author of the blog of African American Wilson, Black Wide Awake, A Native Wilson, Black Genius, and the Independent School of 1918.
Thank you so much. As noted, I am a native of Wilson, so pleased to be here with you tonight. If you will bear with me just a second and I'll share my screen and then I'll get started with my presentation. In 1918, following the example of 11 courageous women and led by church leaders from several denominations, East Wilson's African American community stood together to resist violence and misogyny. I'll be talking tonight about the colored school boycott, a community to injustice. So here we have a bird's eye view of Wilson in about 1908, which is 10 years before this boycott. If you, those of you who are from Wilson, if you know the White's Tire location with the man holding up the tire, that's approximately here. And then if you look south toward now South Pender Street, this would have been the colored graded school at that time. The colored graded school opened in the 1890s and for 40 years was the only public school for African Americans in Wilson. It was grades 1 through 8 only, and children came from all over the city to attend at that one location. Of course, the work of children was invaluable at that time, and sending them to school was a sacrifice. Children of many ages were in every grade as children attended when they could, and work and illness often kept them out of school. This photo actually is a picture of a class at the colored graded school in about 1933. This is my uncle here, my dad's oldest brother. And at the time of the boycott that we're going to talk about, there were about 11 teachers in the school. All, of course, were African American. And the school principal, whose name was J.D. Reed, he was African American as well. The superintendent of schools, however, was white, and his name was Charles L. Kuhn. Some of you may recall Kuhn Junior High School, formerly Kuhn High School in Wilson. Of course, it was named after Charles Kuhn. In 1918, the United States adopted daylight savings time. Now, this change in time created confusion about school hours, and on April 1st, many students arrived at school an hour early. African-American teacher Mary C. Ewell disagreed with Principal Reed about when to release students on that day, since they had been there an hour early. As a result of this disagreement, he ordered her to the office of the white Wilson School superintendent, Charles L. Kuhn. Reed accused Ewell of being insubordinate, and when she insisted on defending herself, Kuhn slapped her in the face. In protest, this of course is this is Charles L. Kuhn High School, we all know. In protest, Mary Ewell and 10 of her fellow teachers resigned en masse. So these are 9 of the teachers who resigned. This is Mary Ewell here. We only know the names of these 9. Most of them were not actually Wilson natives, but were living in the city at that time and working. So these are, again, 9 of the 11 teachers that resigned. In support of the teachers, the Black parents of Wilson pulled their children out of the colored graded school. Mary Ewell pressed charges against Charles Kuhn. In court, Ewell's lawyer declared that she had filed charges in order to make sure that the public was aware of what had happened and to assert her rights to protection under the laws of the state of North Carolina. Mm. She also wanted to fight rumors that she was a troublemaker who had, among other things, protested against riding in the colored section of a train. After Ewell contacted civil rights leader W.E.B. Du Bois, the national press widely publicized the story. And here is, it's a little difficult to see, but here is a letter that Ms. Ewell wrote to W.B. Du Bois. This is actually a follow-up letter in which she says to him that she had received his letter and that she was prepared to send him any details that he needed about the incident that had occurred at the colored graded school. And again, this incident was covered in the Black press across the country, particularly the Pittsburgh Courier, as well as the New York Age covered this story. Ultimately, Kuhn pled guilty to simple assault and fined him 1 penny. In the meantime, education, of course, was vitally important to the African-American community. And so having pulled their children out of school, having engaged in a boycott against the colored graded school, what was the community to do? Encouraged by the city's Black Kurd and professional class, Samuel L. Vick, who was an educator, a church leader, and a businessman in Wilson, donated a large building that he owned in the 600 block of Vance Street. Financed with 25 cents a week tuition payments and elaborate student musical performances, the Wilson Normal and Independent School operated for nearly 10 years. And here's an article that appeared in the Wilson Daily Times in November 12th at the opening of the new school. And you may note that the head of the new school at the head of the new school were 2 pastors, Reverend Perry, Robert Perry, who was an Episcopal priest, and Reverend Fred M. Davis, who was pastor of what is now Jackson Chapel Baptist Church. Sam Vick was the chairman of the board of directors, and Dr. Phillips, who was a dentist, was its secretary. So in the 6 months since the incident had happened, the community had raised $2,400 to support the school. There is one known photograph of the colored graded school. My grandmother actually attended this school. She spoke of recalling that school suddenly ended one year, and when they went back, they went to a school on Vance Street that had a long staircase in the front. So this was a 2-story building. It actually stood into the 1970s on Vance Street. And here you can see dozens and dozens of children crowded here in front of the school and up on the balcony. These are all children whose parents, again, pulled them out of public school to attend a community-supported institution to protest this event. The colored school boycott, which was sparked by African-American women, was an astonishing act of prolonged resistance that unified Wilson's Black working and middle classes in the era of Jim Crow. Imagine the bravery. Parents, most of whom worked as factory laborers or domestics or farmhands, risked their jobs to stand up for what was right. Imagine the determination. The community protested mistreatment, but also kept their eyes on the prize of education and found a way to educate their children without supporting a system or a structure that abused them. And then again, imagine the commitment. The school lasted for 10 years. In 2021, the Wilson County Historical Association raised a historical marker recognizing the valor and commitment of Mary C. Ewell and the supporters of the Wilson Normal and Industrial Institute. This marker stands in the 300 block of North Pender, just north, or actually northeast of the intersection with Green Street, between Green and Vance. When you see this marker, think of these early Wilson warriors against injustice. If you'd like to know more about the school boycott, please visit the Freeman Roundhouse Museum in Wilson, which has information, or visit Black Wide Awake, which is again my blog. I've got probably 10 or 12 posts concerning the school boycott, which again I regard as perhaps the most revolutionary act that occurred in what was the early, could be considered sort of an early civil rights moment in Wilson history. And that it was led by women makes it even more remarkable, given that it was 1918. Thank you so much for this opportunity to share this bit of Wilson's history, share this story. I believe fervently that we need to both preserve and tell our stories. And I, again, appreciate this opportunity. Thank you.